Magic systems are world-defining constructs in fantasy world building, and all of them suck but the one I'm going to be telling you about today. You might say,
"But J-Bat, you already have a magic system in this world. You mentioned it in an earlier video."
And that thought leads us to the first point about magic systems, and that is that it's magic, so consistency is actually a bad thing. Who says you can't just make a new magic system in your world, even if it's incompatible in terms of theme, internal logic, aesthetic, or even power scaling? Nobody can. It's magic, so the rules are whatever I say they are, and that makes them good. The number one rule of magic is that anything it does, for any reason, to any person, at any time, can be answered with, "because it's magic." This is the greatest strength of employing magic in your storytelling. I can show you with our advanced graphical system here. As you can see, we have cause here on one side, and then over here we have effect. But there's a gap here. There's a gap here that we need to figure out how to bridge. And storytelling is all about crossing that gap, right? Now that can be difficult, as said. You have to do some thinking, some planning maybe, some character development. But you know what can make all of that go away? Magic. Boom. Done. No more thinking, no more wrinkles in that brain of yours. Honestly, my job here won't be done until I've smoothed out all the wrinkles in each and every one of your brains. And impossible the task may be for such an erudite audience as I am so blessed to possess, rest assured that I will not stop until the job is done. Anyway, the core thing to remember is that this is the end-all be-all of our reasoning for anything that happens. But what we need to do is do a little bit of work concealing that fact and dressing it up so that it becomes just a little bit less obvious. So our magic, right, it needs an origin. There are two essential approaches to where magic can originate from in fantasy. It's either a natural phenomenon, or it is handed down by the gods or some other equivalent immortal being. If it's a natural phenomenon, we get the upside of it being more mysterious, and therefore we will give the audience less ammunition with which they can call it inconsistent or stakes destroying, because we can say that they simply don't understand it well enough. However, if a god hands down the magic, then we can simply decree our protagonist blessed by the god or gods of magic, and everyone we don't like, and or the villains, can be cast down by the gods of magic at any time when that becomes convenient for the plot. But we're setting up a little bit of a false dichotomy here. Why pick just one when we could do both? More magic is more better. So there's natural magic, but there's also a god of magic so that we have a personified force that can give and take magic whenever we want it to. But only sometimes, because then the audience might ask,
"Well, then why doesn't that god just take away magic from the villain?"
That's also why we have natural magic, so that we can say the villain just taps into that kind as a backup or something along those lines. Or maybe there's an evil god providing his magic. Or just to keep things a little better under control, we'll say that only in the kingdom of Kingia, where our protagonist is from, do they actually have a god of magic in their pantheon. Now, why would they be the only ones to have that? Well, because only their pantheon is actually correct. Everyone else in the world is stupid, including our elves and our dwarves and stuff, and they just forgot to put a god of magic into their pantheons. That could be another approach through which we solve our villain problem too, because he simply might not believe in the magic god. But the most important thing about magic is not its origins, or its limitations, or its requirements on the caster. It's just about what it can do, and the more it can do, the better. That's why our magic's full title is going to be called Pyro Cryo Aqua Natura Sole Umbra Sanguifero Fulguro Sana Anima Peste Bestia Obscura Stulta Fide Omnia Necromancy. Because it can do everything and is therefore the best magic system in all of fiction. You might have heard a few of those Latin prefixes in there and wondered to yourself, sanguimancy? Pestimancy? necromancy, blood, plagues, and raising the undead? Sounds a little bit evil for the magic system that our protagonist might well be using. Before we keep addressing the effects of our magic, its ethics are itself worth something of a discussion. Different verses handle this differently. In some worlds, all magic is considered to be evil, and others, all magic is considered good or at least neutral, and then some fall in between. But those worlds that consider all magic good know what it's about. There exists a social stigma about raising up someone's dead parents as skeletons for my army, draining the blood of my enemies from their eyes and ears, and then giving them the bubonic plague and spreading it to their entire homeland. Then that's lame as hell, and they should just get over it. Magic is bad when the bad guys use it, and good when the good guys use it. Just because our protagonist's magic is powered by torturing the souls of the damned or by blood of the innocents doesn't make it evil. You trying to stop my protagonist from being allowed to use blood magic and necromancy and give people plagues is you trying to limit my creativity and my cool factor, and we can't have that. The second golden rule of magic is that anything about it that restricts options for our protagonist, including limitations, but we'll get to those, is bad. Limitations make your magic lame, not interesting. An example of that is in Star Wars. The only time the Force was cool was when in one random video game an edgelord pulled a spaceship out of the sky. Every other time the Force has been portrayed, it's been kinda lame. Gandalf is cool, but can he create nuclear explosions? Didn't think so. All Harry Potter can do is shoot red out of his wand, and that isn't healthy for anybody. Our magicians can create nukes and can shoot anything they want out of their wands. They don't even need wands because those, alongside staves, are basically crutches for inferior spellcasters. They don't need spellbooks either because those require reading, and reading is for chumps. We're writing a book, yes, but remember that it's all about the movie deal we'll be getting. We just need to sucker enough of those fabled book readers who really just buy these to put something decent looking on their shelf into purchasing this so that we can get the attention we need for Spielberg to come knocking at our door. Anyway, the world may be our oyster in terms of what we can do with magic, but we can't just leave it as a grab bag because then, in the tiny minds of our audience, this will all appear like just one giant mess of effects with nothing to tie them together. That may be true, and what I'm about to suggest won't change that, but it will conceal it. We need schools of magic. Not magic schools, but I might mention those later, but schools of magic. Like Skyrim has, alteration, conjuration, destruction, illusion, and restoration. D&D also has a similar concept going on. Now, you might think this is useful for a categorization, but what we really want this for is to limit what our protagonist's enemies can have. Our protagonist has his own school, the school of heroic and better than other peopleation magic, which is all of the schools and also better than all of the schools. Protagonist Von Generic, Foolio Underrock, and even Killblood Heartthrob are all in some way practitioners of this. And for today's purposes, our protagonist will be Jerry Slaughter, like a dark and twisted version of Harry Potter. His personality trait, singular, is that he likes studying magic. It's a very involved and scientific field in this world, to be sure. But anyway, those other magic schools besides the school of heroic and better than other peopleation are still important because then, when our protagonist gets into a wizard duel, he can identify that his enemy, puny as they are, only knows one of the magic schools, and he can therefore always beat his enemies. He'd always win anyway, of course, but at least this provides a logical way of concealing his plot armor. And if we need to make the enemy seem more powerful, we can say that they're wielding some sort of magically enchanted item that might make it seem like it'll give them an edge, but it's really just there to complement Jerry Slaughter's kit once he leaves said enemy splattered all over the grass. Look, just because every battlefield Jerry Slaughter leaves looks like a scene out of Saw does not mean he uses excessive force. Everyone he targets deserves it, of course, but since we're talking powerful mages, that means the next topic naturally has to be wizard duels, and so shall that come after a word from today's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Humans spend, or should be spending, a third of their lives sleeping. Sleep is in some ways the most important part of your day, and that has a major influence on your health, energy, and mood. And it's for that reason that we'll be talking about Manta Sleep today and their high-quality sleep masks. They sent me a Manta Cool sleep mask and a Manta white noise machine to try out, and I've been having a great experience with them over the past week or so. It's very hot where I live, especially around this time of year, and the cooling features of the Cool mask were very well tuned. Enough to add some pleasant chill, but not freeze my nose off. They're very adjustable with eye cups you can place such to suit your face, and I was able to make them suit my own weird face very easily to achieve another advantage of these: total blackout from light. I keep pretty strange hours pretty often, and waking up 4 hours in with the sun in my face had been a pretty consistent annoyance that shutting the blinds never quite fixed as well as I wanted it to. But with one of these sleep masks, I was able to wake up, and I'm consistently surprised to see how it actually is very bright out when I take it off. Combine that with the white noise machine to keep away the silence that my tinnitus-addled ears hate, and you've got some great products I have no trouble recommending. They've got a bunch more stuff: heating masks, silk masks, even some with sound. So if any of that sounds good to you, check them out with my affiliate link in the description below and using the code JBATSLEEP for a nice 10% discount. It helps out the channel a ton. Anyway, thank you to Man to Sleep for sponsoring the video, and thank you for not skipping the ad. Wizard duels. You've got to have a magic fight if you're gonna have magic people. Otherwise, what's even the point? However, a big problem can come up here. Battles are complicated and require strategy, and I don't know strategy. All I know is that Sun Tzu said, "If fighting is sure to result in victory, then you must fight." And I'd say he knows a little more about fighting than you do, pal, because he invented it, and then he perfected it so that no man could best him on the Ring of Honor. But you know what Sun Tzu didn't have? Magic. And therefore, strategy using magic is whatever I say it is. And what I say it is this. Just revert to magic laser versus magic laser. Look, I know the point of the magic system is that it can basically do anything to anyone at any time, but like, if all those infinite things are an option, then we'd have to write an art of war of our own to understand how to write it, and need I remind you, we're here to do as little actual writing as possible. The idea is to brand this magic system as one where you can do anything, and to show that as being the case when it's convenient or easy, but at the end of the day, you can just make up an excuse that looks something like this. We've got our two wizards here, but they're both too powerful to use more out there spells against one another, so they need to do the magic laser fight because that's just them unleashing their raw, unfiltered power upon one another to determine who the victor should be. Not only does this justify you not really having to think about magic tactics, but it also allows you to very visually, i.e. with more of your mage's color, show the protagonist they are that much better than their enemy. You see, our protagonist is this much better than his enemies. The haters might say that this becomes boring, trite, or even that the conclusions are obvious and predetermined. Just because we do everything in our power to establish that our protagonist, Jerry Slaughter, is the most powerful guy to have ever lived in this universe or any other universe except for the other protagonists we've made up that I think are slightly more important than him, doesn't mean that the audience won't be at the edge of their seat wondering if Jerry Slaughter is going to prevail in the end. So Jerry Slaughter prevails, dumping his magic all over whatever glup shitto Dark Lord we've got him up against this time until he disappears in a puff of PG-13 friendly ash and smoke. To make it seem like that was actually difficult for Jerry Slaughter, even though it really wasn't, we now need to talk about our magical limitations. Naturally, we've saved the worst for last because magical limitations, as established, are lame and bad, and you should have as few of them as possible. Some settings require material components for spellcasting, and while that does have the advantage of you padding out your page count by making your protagonist go shopping for those magical components, it's hard to make work because then you might actually have to set a real number on the amount of times your protagonist can cast something. Which is why, if you use material components, you should always be careful not to use exact measurements. Say that your protagonist grabs a handful of mage dust or arcana flower or unobtainium or whatever it is. Say that whatever they've acquired is enough for several casts, and then do what you can to prevent the audience from figuring out that several has turned out to actually be about 57. Skill, of course, is another natural limitation to play around with because it's very easy to just say that your character is simply more skilled and thus immune to the limitation, whereas lesser characters will have to actually deal with it. Another limitation might be that more powerful magic simply is more difficult to learn or even to access, perhaps kept under lock and key by powerful institutions. What the foolhardy might see as a way to develop the world building of this story, to develop a reasoning as to what kinds of magic are considered dangerous or that should be kept from the public and protected. Real brainiacs see a loot crate for your protagonist to crack open. Whoever heard of secrets man wasn't meant to know or forbidden knowledge? Leave such concepts to Lovecraft and his tentacle playthings. Jerry Slaughter is simply built different and would outmog Azathoth any day. So I highly recommend keeping magic secret, if only so your protagonist looks even cooler when he reveals the secrets and teaches nuke bending to everyone, or maybe time travel, which, if we decide we don't want either of those things in the world at a later date, it's good to keep in mind that you can always just pull a Harry Potter and have a doltish character accidentally burn all the scrolls down or knock down a shelf or something like that. But the absolute best kind of magical limitation is physical exhaustion. But when handled right, it can be implemented with the least potential thought out of all of these, and that makes it our golden ticket. Limitations like these, that rely on somewhat nebulous boundaries of personal energy, be it from one's own willpower or otherwise, give us the leeway to get away with whatever we want. If at the beginning of our story casting a fireball almost exhausts our protagonist, the audience still can't call him throwing 4,000 of them in the span of a single hour by the end of the novel unrealistic or unauthentic, because he simply just pushed that much harder with his willpower. It's adrenaline and stuff, you know. It's great because it allows you to manipulate the fact that humans are actually capable of insane stuff when under critical danger, and use that to stretch credibility as far and wide as you could want it to. And trust me, it'll never break. But in general, whenever in doubt, use magic, including when adding familiars. A familiar summoned by your protagonist to be a marketable, plush potential creature is always a good idea. Remember the men's theorem for manly writing. Merchandising and extortion, not substance. Remember that when anything in your plot is getting hard to put together, there's nothing magic can't fix. It's like Flex Seal or ShamWow in that way, and isn't that why we all come together to experience the fantasy genre? Billy Mays was the best kind of wizard. He was the master of marketomancy. But with that established, hopefully now you know how to write one of the magic systems of all time. And, I hope that this glass board thing has both worked and been enjoyable, because my God, it has been a nightmare, and I've had to cram so much extra stuff into such a small space. I think I've permanently lost sanity points. But anyway, if this sounds like a place you want to be, you should like and subscribe. We also have a Discord if you want to hang out with my editor and I, and a Patreon if you're crazy enough to want it, where we post all our videos early. As we close out, I'd like to thank those patrons of ours: Sani, Isaac Parrott, Raymond Don, Sadako, Cavalier, Sazabi, Shieldmate, Fenya, and Michelle of the Knights of the Inner Circle. Vian and Jody on Void are Knights, and Greer, TOW, Craig, Victoria, Lauren, Noah, Saint Sir Nicholas, Josh, Kelly, Citron, and Realize, our loyal squires. And remember, at a certain point, one might start to wonder when such a proliferation of magic begins to disrupt one's concept of what reality is in a setting. When that which is definite and unchanging comes loose in the face of an ever-shifting world in which its rules can be magically altered at any moment. There's something interesting in there for a story concept, I think, alongside a plurality of migraines and profound substance abuse, both of which I think would be needed to write such a world correctly in all likelihood. Yet magic's greatest strength can often lie in the uncanny, when it appears where it's least expected, where it causes the walls that surround our comfortable reality to shimmer and bend.